Here is the paraphrased version of the script, with slight adjustments to word order while preserving the original style and articulation. شرطة. The ledger's discovery came about by accident one Thursday afternoon in late September. Thomas Harrow, the surveyor for the parish of Nakaitek, had come to the Browsebris plantation to measure disputed boundary lines between the wealthy estate and the neighboring Dorset Holdings. The disagreement had been ongoing for 3 years, a matter of conflicting deeds and unclear property markers that had finally escalated to the point where official intervention became unavoidable. Harrow was a meticulous man, the type who kept detailed records and believed that precision in measurement was a moral obligation. He had arrived at the plantation at 1 in the afternoon, expecting to spend the day walking the perimeter with a surveying chin and a notebook, but the family had gone into town for supplies. The man has stood silent in the humid Louisiana heat, its white columns casting long shadows across the front. The servants had been given the afternoon off, a rare recurrence arranged by the overseer without consulting anyone. Harrow found himself alone on the property, waiting for someone to return and grant him access to the documents he needed to verify the boundary lines. He waited on the front for nearly an hour, watching the heat shimmer off the fields. The cicadas screamed in the trees. A mockingbird called from somewhere in the cold. The world seemed suspended in the thick, drowsy atmosphere of early autumn in Louisiana, where time moved slowly and the heat made thinking difficult. It was boredom, pure and simple, that led him to the study. The door was a door, not locked, not deliberately concealed, just slightly open in a way that suggested it had been left that way by accident or by someone who did not think it mattered. Harrow was not a man of particular moral conviction, but he was a man of curiosity. He stepped inside. The study was cool and dim, the heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. The room smelled of leather and old feather, along with the faint mustiness of a place not often opened to fresh air. A mahogany desk dominated the space, its surface covered with correspondence, ledgers, and scattered documents. On the wall behind the desk hung a portrait of a man in his 60s, Nathaniel Rich, Harold Somod, though he had never met the patriarch of the family. Harrow was not looking for anything in particular. He simply wanted to sit in the cold darkness for a moment, away from the oppressive heat, but his eyes fell on the desk and on the leather-bound ledger that lay beneath a journal and several letters. The ledger had no title on its spine. It was unmarked, anonymous, the kind of book that might contain anything, household accounts, business records, personal notes. Harrow picked it up without thinking much about it. He opened it. The first page contained إهداء 1832. Below that, a name, William Rich, and then a series of entries in a careful, precise hand, W. Rich, born March 1832. Healthy, strong, are apparent. Harrow turned the page. More names, more dates, more careful notations. J. Rich, born John 1835. Healthy, promising. C. Rich, born August 1838. Healthy, beautiful. The entries were sparse but methodical, like the records of a man keeping track of something important. Harrow continued turning the pages, reading entries that spanned years. The handwriting remained consistent, though it seemed to grow more careful, more deliberate as the years passed. And then he found it. The entry was dated July 1841. Rich. Bound July 18 1841. Healthy at birth. Midwife reports condition of Spain. Curvature note. Severity uncertain. Arrangements to be made. Harrow's breath caught. He read the entry again, then continued turning the pages. The subsequent entries, scattered across the following years, painted a picture that made his hands grow cold despite the heat of the day. Continues in backwaters. How assigned as primary caregiver. No contact with other children. No record in household accounts. 1844 remains in good health. How reports no incidents. Continued isolation necessary. 1847 census taker carrot visited. 3 children reported. Note mentioned. No questions asked. 1850 not 9 years old. Hester reports shareds. Books removed from her quarters. Continued isolation essential. 1853 shows signs of understanding her situation. How reports questions? Answers given carefully. Isolation must continue. 1856 the question of permanence becomes pressing. Is now 15 years old. Options limited. Cannot continue indefinitely. Must consider alternatives. 1858 is now 18. The matter becomes urgent. Her awareness of her situation increases. Hester reports she is asked about her future. What future can be offered? What future should be offered? 1860 and then in March 1863 has كون. Hester reports escape during the night of the 14th. Search conducted. No trace presumed lost. The next entry did not come until June of that same year. The matter is resolved. Is dead. This is the official account. This is the proof that will be recorded. No further entries required. And at the bottom of the badya, letters so small they were almost illegible, as though the writer was trying to hide them even from himself. May God forgive what I have done. Harrow closed the ledger slowly. His hands were shaking. He stood in the cold darkness of the study for a long moment, the ledger held against his chest, trying to understand what he had read. A child, a girl named Morkera, born with some kind of spinal condition, hidden away for 22 years. Erased from every official record. And then, in the chaos of the Civil War, she had disappeared. The implications of what he had read began to settle over him like a what. This was not simply a family secret. This was something darker, a deliberate erasure, a systematic removal of a human being from the official record of existence. This was a crime, though Harrow was not entirely sure what crime it was. There was no law against hiding a child, no statute that made it illegal to keep someone isolated. But there was something profoundly wrong about it nonetheless. Harrow heard the sound of a carriage approaching the house. He quickly replaced the ledger beneath the journal and letters exactly as he had found it. He left the study and closed the door behind him, stepping out onto the front just as the rich family's carriage pulled up to the house. He never mentioned what he had seen. But the knowledge of it settled into him like a seed, and it would grow slowly and inexorably for the rest of his life. To understand what the ledger contained, one must first understand the Rich family itself. Nathaniel Rich was born in 1798, the son of a moderately successful planter named Samuel Rich. Samuel had inherited his plantation from his father, who had inherited it from his father before him. By the time Nathaniel was born, the family had been in Louisiana for 3 generations, long enough to establish themselves as respectable members of the planter class, but not so long that they had accumulated the kind of fast wealth that would bless them among the true neglect. Nathaniel inherited the plantation in 1820 when he was 22 years old. His father had died suddenly, a fever that came on quickly and took him within a week. Nathaniel had not been particularly close to his father, but he had learned from him the essential lessons of plantation management: how to work the land, how to manage the enslaved people who worked it, how to keep meticulous records, and how to maintain the appearance of respectability that was essential to a planter's social standing. In 1823, Nathaniel married Eleanor Broussard, the daughter of a wealthy merchant from New Orleans. Eleanor was 20 years old, beautiful in the way that was fashionable at the time: pale skin, dark eyes, a small waist shaved through the wearing of tight corsets. She came to the marriage with a substantial dowry and the expectation that she would bear Nathaniel several healthy sons to carry on the family name. For the first 15 years of their marriage, Eleanor fulfilled this expectation admirably. She bore Nathaniel 4 children in rapid succession: William in 1832, James in 1835, Catherine in 1838, and Margaret in 1841. The first 3 were healthy and strong. The 4th was not. The birth of Margaret was difficult. Eleanor had been in labor for more than 20 years, and by the time the midwife finally delivered the child, both mother and daughter were exhausted. The midwife, a woman named Josephine, who had delivered every child born to the planter families within 20 miles, emerged from the birthing room with an expression that told Nathaniel everything he needed to know before she spoke a single word. Carol, Josephine said, her voice carefully noted, healthy, strong lambs. Nathaniel nodded, waiting for the rest. He had learned over the course of his marriage that there was always a rest. But there is something, Josephine continued, choosing her words with obvious care. The child's pain, it curves. Not severely, but it is there. She will walk, I believe, but perhaps not as others do. The curvature may worse as she grows, or it may remain as it is. It is difficult to say at this stage. The silence that followed was absolute. Nathaniel stood in the hallway outside the birthing room, his hands clenched into fists, and tried to process what he had just heard. A daughter with a curved spine. A daughter who would not walk as others did. A daughter who would be mocked, visible, different. Is she otherwise healthy? He asked finally. Yes, Josephine said. Her heart is strong. Her lungs are strong. She's a beautiful child. The curvature of the spine is the only issue. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Thank you, Josephine. Your services are no longer required. I will arrange for payment. He did not go into the birthing room to see his daughter. Instead, he went to his study and bought himself a glass of whiskey, though it was only 9 in the morning. Eleanor recovered from the birth within a week, as she had recovered from her previous 3 deliveries. She held the infant. They named her Margaret, after Nathaniel's mother, with the same care she had shown her other children. But something had shifted in the household, something subtle but unmistakable. The servants noticed it first, the way Eleanor's jaw tightened when she looked at the child, the way Nathaniel would leave the room when Margaret cried, the way the family seemed to have collectively decided that something was wrong, not with the child herself, but with the fact of her existence. By the time Margaret was 6 months old, she had been moved to a separate wing of the house. The move was presented to the servants as a practical matter. The child's condition required special care, special attention, special arrangements. A slave woman named Howe, who was in her 50s and had been with the family since before Nathaniel's marriage, was assigned as Margaret's primary caregiver. Howe was a woman of few words and fewer questions. She had lived long enough to understand that asking questions about the decisions of white people was a dangerous proposition. She took the infant Margaret to the back wing of the house, to a set of rooms that faced away from the main plantation, and she began the work of raising her. The other servants soon learned not to ask about Margaret. It was easier that way, easier to pretend she did not exist than to confront the reality of her existence. The children of the enslaved workers were told not to go to the back wing. The house servants were instructed not to speak of the child to anyone outside the household. Even within the household, Margaret became a kind of unspoken presence, acknowledged only in the most public ways, discussed only in whispers, treated as though she were a shameful secret that the family had collectively tried to keep. But Margaret existed. She existed in the darkness of the back wing, in rooms that faced away from the main house. She existed in the sound of Howe's footsteps, in the taste of the food brought to her, in the veil of the cotton dresses that Howe dressed her in each morning. She existed in the silence that surrounded her, a silence so complete that it became its own kind of presence. The back wing of the rich plantation house was not a danger. It was not a place of chains or torture or explicit cruelty. It was simply a place of isolation. Rooms that were clean and reasonably comfortable, furnished with a bed, a chair, and a small table. There was a window, but it faced the back of the property, away from the main house and the fields. The view was of trees and overgrown gardens and the servants' quarters in the distance. Howe brought Margaret her meals 3 times a day. She brought her water for washing. She brought her clean clothes. She brought her, when Margaret was old enough to ask for them, books. The books came from the main house, good volumes that Eleanor had brought with her from New Orleans, books that had been read and reread until they were worn and familiar. Howe did not know where they came from exactly. She simply found them left in her quarters with a note in Eleanor's careful handwriting, for the child, if she wishes. Margaret learned to read from old primer that had belonged to William when he was young. She learned to write by scratching letters into the dust on the windowsill using a haystack she had found in the cupboard. She learned the names of the trees outside her window by listening to the serpents talk in the yard below. She learned the rhythms of the plantage, the sound of the bell that called the veiled hands to work at dawn, the sound of the whip that sometimes followed, the sound of voices singing in the quarters at night. She learned everything except how to be seen. By the time Margaret was 10 years old, she had read every book that Howe brought her. She had memorized the passages from Shakespeare and Milton. She understood the principles of mathematics from an old arithmetic text. She could speak French after a fashion from a grammar book that had belonged to Catherine. She had taught herself to write in a careful, precise hand, copying passages from the books she read until her handwriting became almost indistinguishable from the printed text. But she had never been to school. She had never sat in a classroom with other children. She had never been taught by a teacher. She had never had a conversation with anyone except Howe. And Howe's conversations were limited to practical matters: eat your food, drink your water, time for bed. Margaret understood, though no one had ever explicitly told her, that she was not supposed to exist. She understood that her family had decided she was an inconvenience, a problem to be managed rather than a person to be acknowledged. She understood that the world outside the back window did not know she was alive. But she also understood, in the way that intelligent children understand things, that this situation was not permanent. She understood that she was growing, that her body was changing, that eventually something would have to change about her circumstances. She did not know what that change would be, but she knew it was coming. She waited for it with the patience of someone who has nothing but time. The Civil War came to Louisiana in 1861 when Margaret was 20 years old. The war was distant at first, something that happened to other people in other places. But by 1862, Union forces were moving up the Mississippi River. By 1863, the war had come to Louisiana in earnest. Plantations were being seized, burned, abandoned. The world that the Rich family had known was collapsing. Nathaniel Rich, now in his 60s, was not a man of strong convictions about slavery or the Confederacy. He had inherited the plantation and the enslaved people who worked it, and he had managed both with the same careful attention to detail that he brought to all his affairs. But he was not passionate about the cause of the South. He was simply a man trying to preserve what he had built, trying to maintain his position in a world that was rapidly becoming unstable. As the war progressed, the plantation became empty. Some of the enslaved workers fled to Union lines. Others simply disappeared into the chaos of the conflict. The fields, which had once been carefully tended, began to grow wild. The house, which had once been maintained with meticulous care, began to show signs of neglect. It was during this chaos in the spring of 1863 that something happened that would change everything. The ledger's entry for March 1863 was brief, almost cryptic. M. has gone. Hester reports escaped during the night of the 14th. Search conducted. No trace. Presumed lost. What had actually happened on the night of March 14th, 1863 was never fully documented. But the evidence suggests that Morker, now 22 years old, had simply walked out of the back wing and into the chaos of the war. She had taken nothing with her except the clothes on her back and the knowledge she had accumulated over 22 years of careful observation and reading. Howe, when questioned by Nathaniel, reported that she had found Morker's room empty the next morning. The window was open. There was no sign of struggle, no indication of violence. Morker had simply left. A search was conducted, but it was half-hearted at best. The plantation was in chaos. The war was raging. The enslaved workers were despairing daily. One more person missing, even if that person was the patriarch's daughter, seemed almost insignificant in the larger context of the collapsing world. After 3 days, the search was called off. Nathaniel Rich did not record what he felt in those 3 days, but the entries in the ledger suggest that he felt something. The next entry, written 3 months later, was different from all the previous entries. The handwriting was smaller, more careful, as though the writer was trying to make himself invisible on the media. The matter is resolved. M is dead. This is the official account. This is the truth that will be recorded. No further entries required. And then at the bottom of the media, in letters so small they were almost illegible, may code forgive what I have done. Thomas Harrow carried the knowledge of the ledger with him for 3 years after he discovered it. He did not tell anyone what he had seen. He was not a man of particular moral conviction, but he was a man of caution. He understood that some secrets, once spoken aloud, could not be taken back. They would spread like a poison through a community, destroying reputations, fracturing families, creating divisions that might never heal. But secrets have a way of finding their own outlets. In 1875, 2 years after the Civil War had ended, Harrow was drinking in a tavern in the parish seat when he mentioned almost casually to a man named Lucien Broussard that he had once seen something unusual at the rich plantation. He did not specify what. He did not mention the ledger by name, but he said enough to pique Broussard's curiosity. What kind of something? Broussard asked. He was nursing a glass of whiskey and had the look of a man who was perpetually disappointed by life. The kind of something that makes a man wonder, Harrow said carefully. The kind of something that doesn't quite add up. Broussard leaned forward. You're talking about the rich family. I'm not talking about anything, Harrow said. I'm simply saying that I once saw something that I didn't understand and that I have spent 3 years trying to forget about it. But you haven't forgot, Broussard said. No, Harrow admitted. I haven't forgot. Broussard was a journalist, or at least he fancied himself one. He wrote occasional pieces for the New Orleans papers about local matters, political scandals, business disputes, the occasional crime. He was also a man of ambition and limited scruples. The hint of a scandal attached to a prominent family was exactly the kind of story that might advance his career. He began asking questions. At first, his inquiries were subtle. He asked about the rich family's history, their holdings, their reputation. He spoke to merchants who had done business with them, to neighbors who had known them for years, to servants who had worked at the plantation. No one told him anything directly. The code of silence that protected the planter class was strong, but he gathered fragments. A comment here, a hesitation there, a meaningful silence when he asked about the family's children. He learned that Nathaniel Rich had 4 children, William, James, Catherine, and then there was a pause, a hesitation, a change of subject. There were 4 children, Browsword pressed. What happened to the 4th? I don't know, the pursued said. She died, I think, when she was young. What was her name? I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But no one could remember. No one had any records of her. No one even seemed to know for certain that she had existed at all. Browsword became obsessed. He spent weeks in the parish records looking for any mention of a 4th Rich child. He found the census records for 1850 and 1860, which listed only 3 children. He found church records that made no mention of a 4th child. He found no death certificate, no burial record, no official documentation of any kind. It was as though the child had never existed. And then, in the summer of 1875, he found someone who remembered. Her name was Hester. She was very old by then, living in the colored quarters of a neighboring plantation, supported by the charity of the family she had once served. She was Diana. Everyone could see it. And perhaps she felt that she had nothing left to lose. Or perhaps she simply wanted someone to know the truth before she took it with her to the grave. Browsword brought her carefully. He did not mention the ledger or the census records or any of the fragments he had gathered. He simply sat with her on the porch of her small house and asked her about the Rich family. Hester was silent for a long time. Then she began to talk. She told him about Morker. She told him about the girl born with a curved spine, hidden away in the back wing of the house. She told him about the years of isolation, the careful erasure from every official record, the way the family had simply pretended she did not exist. She told him about the books that Eleanor had left for Margaret to read, about the way Margaret had taught herself to read and write, about the intelligence that had burned in the girl's eyes even as she was being systematically erased from the world. She was a smart girl, Howe said, smarter than any of them gave her credit for. She read everything. She listened to everything. She understood the world better than most people who were allowed to walk freely in it. What happened to her? Browsword asked. She laughed, Howe said. On the night of March 14th, 1863, she just walked out of that back wing and into the world. I found her room empty the next morning. Did you try to stop her? Howe looked at him with an expression that was difficult to read. No, she said. I did not try to stop her. I was glad she left. I was glad she got away from that place. Do you know where she went? No, Howe said. But I heard things. Years later, I heard things. What things? Howe was quiet for a long moment. There was a woman, she said finally. A woman who lived up in the river country north of here. She kept a school for colored children, taught them to read and write. The woman had a limp. Wallach did not work quite right. She kept to herself, did not speak much about her past, but the description, it sounded like it could have been her. Did you ever try to find her? No, Howe said. It was better not to know. Better for her, better for me. Some truths are dangerous, more proud. Some truths are best left buried. But Broussard was not a man who believed in leaving truths buried. He spent the next year searching. He traveled north along the Care River, asking questions in small towns and settlements. He spoke to teachers, to former slaves, to anyone who might have information about a woman who ran a school for colored children. The trial was faint and often contradictory, but he followed it with the persistence of a man who had found a story that consumed him. In a small settlement called Cutterville, about 60 miles north of the rich plantation, he found a woman named Marker. She was in her mid-30s, living in a modest house on the edge of town. She ran a small school for colored children during the day and taught sewing in the evenings. She was quiet, reserved, and she did not welcome questions about her past. But when Broussard mentioned the rich plantation, something flickered in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her hands trembled as she said it. Broussard brushed gently. He told her about the ledger. He told her about Howe's story. He told her that he believed she was more rich and that he wanted to tell her story, the true story, to the world. Why? Margaret asked. What could word that do? The truth deserves to be known, Broussard said. Margaret laughed, a sound without humor. The truth, she said. The truth is that my family decided I was an inconvenience. The truth is that they erased me from every record, every document, every official account of their lives. The truth is that I was supposed to despair. And when I did, they were relieved. The truth is that no one cared what happened to me. And the truth is that I built a life anyway, without them, without their name, without their acknowledgement. That is the truth, Amor, Broussard. And I don't believe the world needs to know it. But don't you want people to know what was done to you? Don't you want justice? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Justice, she said finally. Justice would require that someone cared enough to pursue it. My family is respectable. They are established. They have money and connections. Who would believe the word of a colored woman against this? And even if they did, what would change? My father is dead. My mother is dead. The world has moved on. I have moved on. Drafting up the past will only hurt people who do not deserve to be hurt. My siblings, their children. It will not bring me anything but pain. Then why did you leave? Broussard asked. Why did you escape? Margaret looked at him for a long moment. Because I wanted to know what it felt like to be seen, she said. I spent my entire childhood invisible. I wanted to know what it felt like to walk in the sun, to speak to the people, to be acknowledged as a human being. I caught that. I have that. I don't need anything else. Broussard left Cutterville without the story he had come seeking. But he did not forget what he had learned. Margaret rich, for Margaret, as she was known in Cotterville with no surname at all, had arrived in the small settlement in the spring of 1863, just weeks after she had left the rich plantation. The journey north had been difficult and dangerous. She had walked 4 days, staying off the main roads, avoiding the Confederate patrols that were still active in the area despite the chaos of the war. She had slept in the woods and in abandoned buildings. She had stolen food from gardens and from the stores of abandoned plantations. She had learned in those first weeks of freedom what it meant to be truly alone in the world. But she had also learned something else, what it meant to be invisible in a different way. As a colored woman traveling alone, she was beneath notice. The white people she encountered did not see her as a person. They saw her as a servant, a slave, a thing. The colored people she encountered were wary of her, unsure of her status, uncertain whether she was free or enslaved. She existed in a kind of luminous space, neither fully visible nor fully invisible. And in that space, she was able to move. She had made her way north along the river, following the river itself when she could, staying in the settlements that doubted its banks. She had worked for food and shelter, doing whatever work was available, washing clothes, cooking, cleaning. She had learned to keep her mouth shut and her eyes down. She had learned to be small and unobtrusive, and she had learned to read the world around her in a way that her years of isolation had prepared her for. By the time she reached Cotterville, she had a plan. The settlement was small, perhaps 200 people, both white and colored. It was far enough north that the war had not devastated it as thoroughly as it had the areas closer to the Mississippi. There was a school run by a white man named Joseph, who taught the white children. There was no school for the colored children. Margaret rented a small house on the edge of town using money she had saved from her work. She began to offer lessons to the colored children in the evenings, teaching them to read and write using the same books that Howe had brought her, the same methods that she had used to teach herself. The children came slowly at first. Their parents were worried. They did not understand why a colored woman would want to teach their children. They did not understand what code reading and writing would do them. But gradually, as they saw their children learning, as they saw the pride in their children's eyes when they could read a word or write their name, they began to support her. Within a year, Margaret had a school. Within 2 years, she had become a fixture in the community. The white people of Cotterville accepted her because she was useful. She taught the colored children, which meant they did not have to worry about it. The colored people of Cotterville respected her because she was educated and kind and because she treated their children with dignity. No one asked about her the best. No one asked where she came from. No one asked why she had a limp, the result of the curved spine that had marked her as different, that had caused her to be hidden, that had made her invisible. In Cotterville, her limb was simply a fact of her existence, no more remarkable than the color of her skin or the sound of her voice. She was simply Margaret, a woman with a skull, a woman with kind eyes, a woman with a past she did not discuss. Margaret lived in Cotterville for 40 years. She taught school during the day and took in sewing in the evenings. She lived simply in the modest house on the edge of town. She did not marry. She did not have children of her own. She did not accumulate wealth or property or any of the things that the world told women they should want. But she had something else: respect, purpose, the knowledge that she was making a difference in the lives of the children she taught. The children who came to her school in those early years grew up and had children of their own. And those children came to her school. By the 1880s, Mortimer was teaching the grandchildren of the children she had taught in the 1860s. She had become a kind of institution in Cotterville, a woman whose presence was so woven into the fabric of the community that it was difficult to imagine the town without her. She never spoke about her past, but she lived in a way that suggested she understood something about suffering and resilience. She was patient with her students even when they were slow to learn. She was kind to the people who were unkind to her. She seemed to understand in a way that most people did not, that everyone was carrying something, some burden, some secret, some pain that they did not speak about. The children loved her. The parents respected her. Even the white people of Cotterville, who might have been expected to resent a colored woman of education and authority, seemed to accept her. Perhaps it was because she never challenged the social order. Perhaps it was because she was so quiet, so unobtrusive, so careful never to draw attention to herself. Or perhaps it was simply because she was so clearly good at what she did. In 1890, when Margaret was in her late 40s, a young man named Joseph came to Cotterville. He was the grandson of the white man who had run the school when Margaret first arrived. He had been educated in New Orleans and had come back to his hometown to teach. He was progressive in his thinking, influenced by the ideas of Reconstruction and the possibilities of a more equal society. He thought at Margaret. "I've heard about your school," he said. "I would like to see it." Margaret was worried. She had learned over the years to be cautious about white people who took an interest in her work. But Joseph seemed genuine. He visited her school, watched her teach, spoke with her students, and then he did something that surprised her. He asked her to help him develop a curriculum for the colored school that he wanted to establish in Cotterville. "I can't do this alone," he said. "I need someone who understands what these children need, who knows how to catch them. I need you." Margaret was silent for a long moment. "Why would you ask me?" she said finally. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. I know that you've been teaching colored children for nearly 30 years, Joseph said. I know that they respect you and that they learn from you. I know that you understand something about education that most people don't. That's enough for me." So Margaret cried. She worked with Joseph to develop a curriculum, to establish a formal school, to train other teachers. She remained in the background, never seeking credit or recognition, but her influence was evident in every aspect of the school's development. By the time Margaret died in 1903, the school in Cotterville had become one of the most respected schools for colored children in the region. Children came from neighboring settlements to attend. Teachers came to learn from Joseph's methods. The school had become a beacon of hope in a time when hope was scarce, and Margaret had become a legend, a woman whose name was whispered with respect, whose life was a testament to the power of education and kindness. whose past remained a mystery that no one dared to ask about. Margaret lived until 1903. She died quietly in her slate in the small house in Cutterville, where she had built her life. The colored community mourned her. The children she had thought came to her funeral, not grown, now with children and grandchildren of their own. They spoke of her kindness, her patience, her wisdom. They did not know that she had been born into refuge, that she had been hidden away, that she had been officially declared dead by her own family. They knew only that she had been Margaret, a woman who had chosen to be seen, who had chosen to matter, who had chosen to live on her own terms. After her death, the house was claimed that a few items were kept by the community, a Bible, a shawl, a small box of letters. The rest was discarded or sold. Among the items that were discarded was a journal, old and worn, with no name on the cover. It was found by a woman named Adeline, who was cleaning the house, and she brought it to the local school teacher, thinking it might be of historical interest. The school teacher opened it and began to read. The first entry was dated July 1841. It was written in a child's fertile hand, each letter formed with deliberate precision. My name is Margaret. I am told I should not write my name, but I am writing it anyway. I am writing it so that I will know, even if no one else does, that I exist. The subsequent entries were a record of a life lived in shadow. They documented the years of isolation, the careful observation of the world through windows and from doorways, the slow accumulation of knowledge and understanding. They recorded the moments of small rebellion, a book read in secret, a conversation overheard and remembered, a decision made in the darkness to become someone other than what her family had decided she should be. The entries grew more sophisticated as more courage. By the time she was a teenager, her journal entries were written in a careful, elegant hand. They showed a mind that was sharp and observant, that was grappling with questions of identity and existence and meaning. I have been thinking about what it means to be a press. One entry read, dated when Margaret was 16. How says that I am a press, that I have a soul, that God sees me even if my family does not. But I wonder if that is true. If no one sees you, if no one acknowledges your existence, or you really a press, or you simply a ghost haunting a house that does not want you? Another entry, dated when Margaret was 18, I have decided that I will not spend my entire life in this room. I do not know how I will live or where I will go, but I know that I cannot stay here. I would rather die trying to be free than live forever in this prison. At least if I die, I will have tried. At least if I die, I will have been something other than invisible. And then the final entry, dated March 14th, 1863. Tonight, I am going to walk out of this house and into the world. I do not know what will happen to me. I do not know if I will survive, but I know that I cannot stay here any longer. I know that I must try to be seen, even if no one is looking. I know that my life is my own, and I am going to live it. Whatever happens after this, I will have chosen it. I will have been the author of my own story. Even if that story is short, that is enough. After that, the entries stopped. The journal was preserved by the school teacher who recognized it as a document of historical significance. It was eventually donated to a library in Alexandria, where it remained for many years, largely unread, catalogued simply as personal journal, author unknown, circa